kuuntele.
Kauan se kestää?
Vartti 10 tai 20 saa maksaa.
Welcome everyone. I am Fredrik Lejonklou. I'm from Uppsala, Sweden, and I have for 35 years installed hi-fi systems. And the last 19 I have been developing and building electronics. We currently make a digital streamer that I control with the iPad here, or the phone, or any digital device, basically, and an integrated amp called the Boazzo, and we make power amps, preamps in this big size, and also this small case which can host a preamp or a phono stage, moving magnet, moving coil, and a headphone amp. And the reason I fell in love with hi-fi is that it's such an interesting field where science meets art. And you can't really make good hi-fi without science. You can't make it without art. So why is it a challenge from a scientific perspective? Maybe that's easier to answer, but I know some engineers think that hi-fi is a simple business, but I say it's not. And you haven't thought it through, because the window you have to handle is really large. You have the audible range, like everyone knows that that's 20 hertz to 20,000 at best. A little lower for me now, but still around there, 20 to 20,000. To reproduce that range well, you need at least 10 times as high a frequency. And you need to go all the way from zero, because that's direct current DC. So 0 to 200,000 you need to control well, to be able to reproduce the audible range. Okay, and then I put that on the x-axis here, but then you have also the dynamic range, which is huge. So we humans can hear, the faintest sound we can hear is called 0 decibels, which is a really faint sound. And then the loudest we can tolerate, which is like a roaring jet engine, that we can tolerate for a short while, is 120 decibels. And that range is 1 to 1 million. Okay, so we have the loudest sound we can tolerate is 1 million times stronger than the faintest one we can perceive, which is a huge range. So we got 1 million there, and we got 200,000 there, and that window is huge when you try to reproduce it with the lowest amount of distortion possible. Okay, so it is an engineering challenge. But then we have the art. Why is it challenging from an art perspective? Well, it is because, in my opinion, the reason for us doing hi-fi, getting a hi-fi system, using a hi-fi system at home, is to enjoy the art of music, right? We don't just want to reproduce sounds, any random sounds. We want to enjoy music. So the only proper way to evaluate how good your system is to experience how well the music communicates with you. And the better the system is, the more emotions you're gonna feel, because music is a language of emotions. Okay, and the better your system is, the broader taste in music you're gonna get, and the more often you're gonna have the system playing, instead of thinking I'd rather have everything quiet now. Okay, so in my opinion, you need the science to design the circuits and the technology, but you need the art side to evaluate how good it is. Okay, so why isn't the science enough here? Why do we have to listen? Well, that's I'm going to tell you an interesting story here. In my estimation, 50% of what we do at Lejonklou Hifi, and that includes my programmer who does the incredible work with the streamer, and my electronic designs. 50% of that fits perfectly in the scientific map. It's on there, and we get the ballpark right. And then the other half, the other 50%, it's like it doesn't really fit the map. It's like either you have small details that make an enormous big difference when you listen to it, and you can't really measure it, or you have in proportionality. How do you say it in English? I'm searching for this English word. Sorry. They're not proportional. The impact. Some small details have an enormous impact, while a really big one that should have a difference doesn't really matter when you listen. Okay, so I'm going to give you one example of this. When the science doesn't help and you need to listen and listen and listen a lot. This is our most inexpensive preamp. It's a super simple design. It has 2 inputs and 1 output, and all it does is change the inputs between 2 and then control the volume. And doesn't even have any buttons, so all you have is a remote, and then it will tell you with a color, just like the integrated does here. Now it's getting louder, yellow, orange, red is the loudest, and purple is the lowest. Okay, that's all this has. So all the energy and all the expenses just go to the circuit, because I wanted it to be as good as possible without with zero bling. No, nothing fancy. Okay. I have fine-tuned every component in that circuit, but when I was done, there's one component that I had not fine-tuned. So the last component I did was a resistor, which was a 1000 ohms. Okay, and it goes from the signal ground. So, for instance, the streamer, you have the signal that it carries a ground, right? Between that and the chassis ground, which goes here. And sometimes you want to have this feature in preamps so that you tie the signal ground to the mains ground. Okay, you don't have to have that, but you can. And it makes a tiny little measurable difference up in the radio frequency stuff. So it's a good way to funnel down some noise. Okay, far outside the hearing range. Anyway, I found that 1000 ohms was a good value, but you can also have it at 0. You just tie it straight down to the mains ground, or you can have it at infinity. You have no connection. Okay, and here comes the interesting part. This does sound different, and 1000 ohms sounded good to me. And if I go lower, for instance, let's take 100, because I did try some big numbers like this, big jumps, and you can have 10,000 here. Okay, if I go up to 10,000, the bass will be the lowest bass, bottom, boom, boom. It will be a little lagging behind in timing, a little like that. And if I go lower to say 100, the bass will be a little cut off, a little staccato. Okay, so it doesn't time with the rest of the music. It's you can't measure it because it's really low in frequency, and it's difficult to measure anything down there really. Okay, so this was the last component. I think this was the last component that I tuned in the whole design. So I thought, let's take, okay, we skip back. I had already determined that the next steps in this resistor series were worse. So that was worse 1020 and 976, they were worse. Okay, so I bought 5,000 of these resistors, and I told my employee Oscar, who is very good at doing repetitive stuff with precision, always correct, always focused. I told him, can you please measure these into 0.1% variation, which then becomes groups like 1,000, you put in one box, and then 1,001 and 999. You get it? So he did all those 5,000, and I listened to them. So I just replaced this, plugged in one at a time, and listened to the super kickin' preamp, and found that 997 was the best. And the interesting thing here, now comes the really crazy part. 996 sounds a little stiff, a little staccato in the low bass, and the difference is not much from 100. And 998 is a little lagging behind, and it's not that far from, it's like the same difference here as the really big ones. Okay, so I thought this is clearly a high peak in performance, and so I said to Oscar that measure this group again and add 1 decimal. Okay, so we go to 100th of percent. So he put them in 10 groups of 997.0, and then there was 997.1, etc. Okay, and I listened to those, and now the differences were not so big anymore, and the best one was actually 0, and you could still hear that 0.1 was a little lagging behind, and the 996.9 was a little cut off. But I decided then that the acceptable range here would be 996.95 to 997.05. So this resistor, which I thought was unimportant and really makes no difference from any scientific, or, well, as I understand it today, you know, science improves, so I might understand one day, but there's no measurable difference between them. But the improvement in the music, the timing of the music, was profound. So that is what my brand is about. I go to extreme detail. The attention to detail doesn't stop here, which is does for some people, or here, but I try to go all the way down into the rabbit hole of everything. So in this case, we had change color here. In this case, we had a very sharp peak like this. If we call this performance, okay, and here was the value. So we had this 997.0. I was here. This is not always the case. Sometimes the peak of performance is like more like this, and then it's easier because with this it's if you make comparisons here, you might think there is no difference because you haven't found the peak yet. Here it's easier because you can hear, okay, it's improving, and now it's getting worse. So it's enough to find something up here, and probably you can't hear the difference of the finest. You don't have to go that far on all components. And sometimes there's also this case that there are several peaks, like one really good one, and then others that you think you thought you found the best, but you need to go further. And this is not often the case in electronics, but it is in torques. So with every product that we make is precision torqued with a torque tool that is calibrated. And there's a little sticker inside this one. If you open it, it will say the torque of every fastener. And those are evaluated by ear too. It's much like tuning a musical instrument. Like tuning a guitar, you can hear that it's, now the notes are clean, and then they get a little false. And in the case of torques, there's often multiple peaks like this. So you've got to try everything from loose to as hard as the fastener will take before it breaks. Because sometimes it's really hard, and there you find the peak. Okay, so that's how we work at Lejonklou Hifi. We make as much as we can in-house, and well, the reason for that is that we want control of it, right? We don't make the cases. They're made in Sweden by a factory that makes cases, and the circuit boards are soldered 1 hour away from us towards Stockholm. So the machine soldering in the oven and the wave soldering, 2 processes are made for us there. So we don't do that, but we do everything else. And when we get the circuit boards that we have shipped the components to, I mean, we measure them and put them in a box and say 50 of these. When we get them back, there are lots of components that we hand solder as the last step. Either because it sounds better or because every individual unit is fine-tuned. And I fine-tune them not by a potentiometer, because it usually doesn't sound very good. Sometimes it does, and then I'm happy. But usually I have to solder a resistor or a diode in, and let it heat up, and then it runs for 2 hours, and then I measure it, and if it's not perfect, then I shut it off, and I change that diode to one that's we measured is a little bit lower, and I repeat that. So sometimes for the Watso integrated amp, I have to do that 5 or 6 times until everything is spot on. And then I pack it down and ship it to the customer.
Happy customer.
The happy customer, hopefully. Otherwise, we take it back. Okay, so if you have any questions, just ask, or if you have anything you want to hear musically.
Out of curiosity,
Yes?
I would like to know how many of those 5,000 resistors were like usable.
Yes, that's a good question because the 5,000 were not enough. We were unlucky with that project because or that resistor because almost all of them were up here. There's a 1% claimed precision in that resistor, but it was much higher. So they were too good. I wish we could have bought it. So I had to buy more and more, and eventually we got a batch that was a little lower. So so I have many thousands of 1,000 ohm resistors, but I save everything. I don't want to throw things away. And the thing is that Oscar has now divided them up in this range, not in that super range. That's only for the 997 one. They have a separate bag. But I have them for, and this is a really common value. So it happens in almost every design that I need something of 1,000 ohms, and then I have that ready to test and listen through all the values, and I pick the best one. So it's already done. So we have that for many resistors. We have like 4 boxes now full of resistor values that Oscar has just measured and selected. But he does more than that. He also assembles the machines.
Can you say about the machine itself? What kind of power you are driving these loudspeakers with?
Yes, the power.
Yes.
Yeah, the output power of the integrated is, depending on how you measure it, it's roughly 2 times 50 watts. But you can push it really hard and just play low bass at 10 hertz, and then you won't. Then you will get less than 30 watts. Okay, so it's a matter of current there. But I usually say 50 watts because that's usually what you get in practice. And there are many unique aspects to my amps. One of them is that what you really need to do if you're worried about power is to try them with your speakers. Somebody wrote to me yesterday that these are very demanding speakers, and I said, we hadn't noticed. And then you try how loud you can play, because my amps, they love to play all the way until they hit the ceiling. There was one customer who told me, I love this, what do you say, self-confidence that your amps have. They think they're unlimited until they hit the roof and it just goes plop. And that's true. They enjoy playing just up to the max. While many designs will sound more and more compressed the louder you play, you'll just get an increase, not of all the dynamics. You will get it squeezed together. Yeah. Okay. Anything more? Or is it time to play? Yes?
Continuation to the first question. Does all those sold preamps have the 997 ohm resistor, or do you need to make a compromise from commercial reasons?
No, they all have that. Yes, these specifications are to be met. And also, that batch of Super Kick-In was only 100 made. And I think half of them are left, roughly. It's a very narrow product, right? Because it only has 2 inputs, so it's for the enthusiast that only wants performance and doesn't care about the looks, and only has 2 sources and can accept no buttons and just a remote. So, performance only. So there are 100 units made, and if I need to make more, I need to redesign it, because there are old components in there. There are some old resistors that are not made anymore. But I had a big bag of them. They're like from the 80s and yeah, they're probably not legal anymore. But I still use them until they run out. And I could make exactly 100 plus one prototype. I had 202 of those capacitors that are missing. And there are a few other things that are very difficult to find. So in that case, it became a limited number. Normally, I try to not have a limited number because it's it's sad to have to redesign it. Okay, we play something. Genre or specific song. Anything you want to hear. We're not going to scare everyone out with metal
Could
like
you
we
play
did
some
twice.
Keiko
Yes,
Matsui?
today. Sorry?
Some Keiko Matsui?
Yes, and how do I spell that?
Just as you pronounce it. It's a Japanese name, so Keiko Matsui.
Keiko Matsui. Yes. And
I think Blue Water is pretty good.
Proof, Edge of Twilight, Embrace and Surrender, Bridge of the Stars, Black Lion. What were you saying?
Euphoria is I think the newest album. And well, The Choice is a pretty good song.
Euphoria, here's the album.
Yeah.
What did you say the song was?
The second song.
Second
Choice.
song, The Choice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's listen to The Choice on our Källa Streamer Quattro 2 integrated amp through Danish O-Fi cables to French Revival audio speakers. Okay, and that's the volume. Now I'm raising it. 60. That's level 70. Let's try that. Thank you.